Hey, it's Amy Shaw here. I'm out here at Deer Dancer Ranch in Central Texas, and I'm doing some shamanic training this weekend. And I just wanted to take a minute to share something that's been really on my mind, and that's suicide. And I wanted to just take a few minutes to make the case that suicide is contagious, and caution you against guarding your mind and being careful, not only what you're putting into your mind, but the kind of stories and stuff that you're listening to. Oh yeah, look at that tree. Oh my goodness. Absolutely beautiful out here. You can hear the birds behind me. Simply divine. Anyways, the reason this is really on my mind is that recently on Netflix I had a recommendation to watch this show called 13 Reasons Why. Maybe you've heard of it. It's real popular right now among high schoolers and junior hires. I didn't watch the show, but I read the little clip about what the show is about, and it said something about it being 13 reasons why this girl commits suicide. And I have a friend who actually watched it, and he told me that it really glamorized suicide and it made him ill. So I knew right away that wasn't something that I wanted to watch. I tend towards suicidality. It runs in my family. And so yeah, I just want to talk about that. Not so much personally about my story, maybe a little bit, but I wanted to share that when I was younger, I had an incident. I went through depression, something I've struggled with most of my life. Depression is what they call it, right? And back in those days, in my teenage years, we didn't have internet, and they didn't have the SSRI class of antidepressants like they do now. So they had the tricyclics. And so what they put me on, because I did have suicide attempts when I was younger, what they put me on was Elavil, and it wasn't really working. So the psychiatrist upped the dose, and it still wasn't working, so he upped the dose some more. Now, had it happened to me in this day and age, I would have got right on the internet and researched it and found out what the maximum dose was, and I would have went in there to the doctor's office and said, hey, what's up with this? But like I said, back then we didn't have the internet, and so I trusted that what my doctor was telling me was the right thing. And so he had me on 3 times the recommended dose for my age, basically being a teenager. And I guess because I was 14 at the time, the pharmacy didn't think it was necessary to put a warning on the bottle to not consume alcohol with this particular medication. So I went to a friend's house to stay the night, and her parents were out of town for the day. And we weren't having a party or anything weird like that. It was very casual, sort of just relaxing. It was her and I. Her brother was home from the army, him and his buddy. We were just kind of hanging out. Her brother actually ended up leaving, and it was just me and my friend. Kathy was her name. And we were going to watch Poltergeist. So we were in the kitchen, we popped popcorn, and we thought, oh, well, we're just going to relax and sit down and have a beer. Nice casual. We weren't trying to be wild or party or anything. And I remember popping open the beer, and I remember taking, a swig of it, and that's the last thing I remember. Well, apparently the alcohol, the Elavil was building up in my liver, and then drinking the alcohol sort of triggered the release of all that buildup. And so essentially I overdosed on my antidepressant, and it totally wasn't intentional. But I don't think that they really knew. They didn't know what was wrong with me. I started going into convulsions, and I became unconscious, and she called her brother over, and they tried this and tried that. And ultimately they had to call my parents, and my parents came, and they had to take me to the emergency room, and it was very dramatic. They had to pump my stomach, and they cut all my clothes off me, and basically, I woke up in the hospital 2 days later with all these tubes down my nose and down my throat, and with the police standing by my bed. After I left to go to the hospital that evening, my friend Kathy was there home alone in the house, and she committed suicide. I'm not going to tell you exactly how she did that, because as I said, suicide's contagious, and even talking about it and being specific about methods and this it's not something that it's not something that I'm comfortable doing. So I'll just say that she committed suicide. She successfully committed suicide. And so of course they thought it was a suicide pact. And when I woke up in the hospital bed. That's why the police were standing beside my bed waiting for me to wake up, because they had questions for me. And of course I was completely shocked because I didn't even know what happened to me. The last memory I had was popping the popcorn and popping the top of the beer and watching maybe 5 minutes of Poltergeist, and that's it. I have no memory after that. So I was completely shocked, and it was pretty devastating. And I don't really know to this day, you know, if my friend thought that I had tried suicide and then that made her. I don't really know. It's not something that she and I had ever talked about. So I don't know what really happened. Just a real tragedy. I had a couple other friends in high school also successfully commit suicide. And I had another incident as an adult. I had an adult friend. I will call him D. And he had an adult brother, a younger brother. I'll call him B. And B also successfully committed suicide in a very, very horrendous, horrific way. I couldn't even utter to you. It was just pretty horrific. At the time, D, my friend D, had a son who was about 10 or 11 years old. And unfortunately, that son, 10 or 11-year-old son, in his early 20s, he ended up successfully committing suicide. So suicide runs in families. It runs in my family. I have a cousin, murder-suicide, and I have a very, very, very small family. And then also my dad's mother had a suicide attempt and was institutionalized for 20 years. So yeah, suicide tends to run in families, and it's very contagious. The reason for this is it's like a spell, you know, it puts a thought in people's head, and once that thought's there, if they're dealing with their own grief or anything like that, it's just that thought is they'll ruminate, and they can actually become suicidal because somebody else has been suicidal. And it doesn't even have to be a friend. It can be something that you hear on the news. I mean, sometimes I'll hear reports on the news of suicides, these horrific suicides, and they make me physically ill. I mean, I just, in my mind, I imagine it, and then for days after I'm still imagining it, I have to really make an effort to sort of cleanse myself of that. And so this show, this 13 Reasons Why that is called, I obviously haven't watched it. I can't really say a whole lot about it, but I do just want to like discourage you from watching it. And if you have kids that are watching it, just pay attention to what they're watching to and be careful. I'm hearing, I think it was Selena Gomez actually produced it, or somebody famous actually produced the show. And the people that produced it might have good intentions. They might think that they're raising consciousness, raising awareness, getting people to talk about it. Suicide's a big problem. You know, let's bring awareness and open up the discussion in our community. And so they might have the good intentions in what they're trying to do and the message they're trying to spread, but honestly, to tell you the truth, it's sort of a form of spell casting, and it's really, really common in our culture the way it is now. Magic is just everywhere. Dark magic is everywhere, and people can be dark magicians, and they're completely unconscious. They don't even know that they are. I mean, of course, there's always people that do know and have the intention, and then there's just people that are unconscious, and it's through their shadow, that these dark forces sort of work. And this could be that case where they had a good intention, but in all honesty, it's like a spell. They're really putting out a spell into our culture with all these, young people that are watching this, and it's romanticizing suicide. So that's what I wanted to offer you today, that suicide's contagious, that you need to guard your mind, guard your heart, be careful. If you have a family member that's committed suicide, you really need to seriously go get some help. Even if you think that you're okay, whether that's psychological, shamanic, spiritual help of some sort, to sort of cleanse yourself and get through the grieving process. It's so important. So anyway, that's all I have for now, and thanks for listening. As always, you guys, if you have questions or comments, leave them below. If you want to get a hold of me, you should know how by now, and I love you guys. Have a great day.